Hello, everybody. We are diving back into the book, A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. If you're just picking up with our video today, George Saunders is a professor at Syracuse University who teaches a writing program. We are reading this book because it's one of the books that teaches principles and feelings and emotions about the concept and the active body of knowledge called storytelling. We are reading through these Russian short stories, and in these Russian short stories, we are learning different ways that the writers from the early 1900s really are bringing us forward, painting pictures in just a few number of pages. And so far in this book that we're reading called The Singers, the short story called The Singers by Ivan Turgenev, we have been introduced to a cast of characters, several of which seem like the sordid crazy bunch. And so far what we've done is fallen into this bar at the very edge of a ravine, splitting off two different sides of a Russian village. And right now, two of these characters are starting to compete. We've learned about the owner of the bar. We've learned a little bit about the competitors and a cast of characters who are around. And at the same time, we are left unknown about who the narrator is. We have not heard a single thing about him other than that he describes himself as I, and then he's finding out about these people. So, but of the wild gentleman, it is worth speaking at a somewhat greater length. The first impression the appearance of this man made was one of the barbaric, ponderous, but irresistible strength. The wild gentleman was clumsily built, rough-hewn, as we say, but he exuded rude health, and strangely enough, his bear-like figure was not without a certain kind of grace, which was perhaps the result of his absolute, calm confidence in his own strength. It was difficult to decide at first glance of what his social class this Hercules belonged, but he did not look like a house serf or a tradesman or a retired and impoverished scrivener or a pugnacious Hunton small county squire. He did indeed seem to be an exceptional case. Nobody knew from where he had descended on our district. It was said that he belonged to the class of free smallholders and had previously been in government service somewhere, but nothing definite was known about it. And indeed, there was no one to find it out from, certainly not from the man himself. There was no more surly and taciturn man in the world. Neither could anyone say positively what he lived on. He was engaged in no trade. He visited no one. He scarcely knew anyone, and yet he had money. Not much money, it is true, but he certainly had some money. He conducted himself not so much modestly. There was nothing modest about him. As quietly, he lived as though he never noticed anyone round him, and he most certainly wanted nothing from anyone. The wild gentleman. This was his nickname. His real name was Perevlisov. Enjoyed enormous influence in all the district. He was obeyed instantly and eagerly, although he had no right whatsoever to give anyone orders. But then he never made the slightest claim on the obedience of people with whom he happened to come in contact. He spoke and was obeyed. Power always claims its due. He hardly ever drank, had no dealings with women, and was passionately fond of singing. There was much that was mysterious about this man. It was as if tremendous forces were suddenly hidden within him, as though he knew that, once aroused, once let loose, they must destroy themselves and everything they touched. And I am sadly mistaken. If some such explosion had not already happened in that man's life, and that, taught by experience and having just escaped destruction, he was now holding himself inexorably under iron control. What struck me particularly about him was the mixture of a sort of innate, natural ferocity with a similarly innate nobility, a mixture such as I have never come across in any other person. And so, the contractor stepped forward, half closed his eyes, and began to sing in a very high falsetto. His voice was quite sweet and agreeable, though a little husky. He played with it, twirled it around like a top, dwelt lovingly and with abandon on the high notes, and with constant downward trills and modulations, and constant return to the top notes, which he held and drew out with a special effort, stopped, then suddenly took up his previous tune with a sort of rollicking, arrogant boldness. His transitions were sometimes rather daring, sometimes rather amusing. They would have given the connoisseur great pleasure. They would have greatly shocked the German. It was a Russian tenor di grazia, tenor lecher. He sang a gay dance tune with whose words, so far as I could make them out among the endless embellishments, extra consonants, and exclamations, were as follows. A little plot of land, my love, I'll sow. A little scarlet flower, my love, I'll grow. He sang, and everyone listened to him with rapt attention. He evidently felt that he was dealing with experts, and that was why he simply put his best leg forward, as the saying goes. And, indeed, in our part of the country, people are good judges of singing. And it is not for nothing that the large village of Sergeyevskoyev on the Oryol Highway is renowned throughout Russia for its especially agreeable and harmonious singing. The contractor sang for a long time without arousing any particular enthusiasm in his hearers. He missed the support of a choir at last. After one particularly successful transition, which made even the wild gentleman smile, Booby could not restrain himself and uttered a cry of delight. We all gave a start. Booby and Blinker began to take up the tune in an undertone, humming, calling out, "Well done! Hold it, you dirty rascal! Hold it! Higher! Higher, you villain! Up! Up! Make it hotter! Hotter, you dirty dog! You cur! You devil take you!" And so on. Behind the counter, Nikolai Ivanitch shook his head to right and left approvingly. At length, Booby began stamping, dancing about, twitching his shoulders, and Yashka's eyes blazed like coals. He shook all over like a leaf and smiled confusedly. The wild gentleman alone did not change countenance and remained motionless as before, but his gaze, fixed on the contractor, softened a little, though his lips kept their contemptuous expression. Encouraged by these signs of general satisfaction, the contractor let himself go in good earnest, and went off into such flourishes, such tongue-clickings and drummings, such frantic throat-play, that when at last exhausted, pale, and bathed in hot perspiration, he threw himself back, and let out a last dying note. A loud burst of general exclamation was the instantaneous response of his audience. Booby threw himself on his neck and fell to smothering him in his long bony arms. Nikolai Ivanitch's fat face flushed, and he seemed to have grown younger. Yashka sounded like a madman. Well done, well done. And even my neighbor, the peasant in the torn coat, could bear it no longer, and striking his fist on the table, exclaimed, "Aha! Good, damn good!" and turning his head, spat with conviction. "Well, my lad, you've given us a treat," Booby cried, not without letting the exhausted contractor out of his embrace. A real treat, and that's the truth. You've won, my dear fellow, you've won. Congratulations, that quart is yours. That fellow Yashka can't touch you. I'm telling you, he can't touch you. You must believe me. And he again pressed the contractor to his bosom. Let him go, for heaven's sake, Blinker said with annoyance. Let him go, you leech. Let him sit down on that bench here. Can't you see how tired he is? Oh, what a silly fool you are, my lad. What a silly fool. Why are you sticking to him like a leaf from the whisk in the bathhouse? Why, of course, let him sit down, and I'll drink to his health, replied Booby, going up to the counter. It's on you, old fellow, he added, turning to the contractor. So there you have it. We've just heard the contractor sing, start the contest, and tomorrow we will find out how the rest of this Russian short story will go. Take care. Yo soy Felipe y seamos mágicos.